Well, it's good to be back, and I will start by saying there's no words to describe a trip like I was on, and there's also no words to describe a missions trip, really, without being there. So that's why I encourage everyone to get out there. Such a powerful time. Oh, wow. Isn't it good to have Big Papa in the house? And the teaching on tithe? It's like Grandpa showed up. You know, Dee Dee said, the apostle comes in to shake things up. And it's good. And I love having Grandpa in the house to give us those teachings. And it was so amazing. Actually, my favorite testimony that I'll start with from Malawi. So I'll do a lot of testimonies, a little bit of preaching, but so I want to talk about the spirit of service today. And but my favorite testimony was I was standing there preaching, and I got done, and Dustin looked at me, who was with us. So I went with Chris Lindberg and Dustin Christensen. Most of you know Chris Lindberg. Some of you might not know Dustin. He's another pastor up there of a house church just about an hour south of Manning, where Pastor Corey's from. And sweet as spirit, and I mean, huge servant. And he just looks at me, he's like, I need more of that. And so I was like, okay, so we were teaching again. And I said, I hope that, all I did was I gave you a Big Papa sermon. He goes, no, that wasn't Big Papa, that was you. And I was thinking about that time when pastor had said, a lady had come to him, and he went to a lady and said, nice song. And she said, that was Jesus. And he said, no, Jesus got a way better voice than you do. And as I was listening to the statement come out of my mouth, and then him rebuttaling me, I was like, oh, I guess so. And Chris and Dustin both said, when you get up there, we do hear Chris. And I started to cry like I am now. And I was just like, it was so that was my favorite testimony, that they could hear a powerful man coming through me. That's why we want to sit in discipleship. We want to sit and be taught. We want to sit and learn. We want to sit and listen and not forsake the assembly of the brethren together and be together. How else are we going to learn? This is the only way we're going to learn. It's the only way we're going to break through. The only way, you can have your personal breakthroughs with God, that's fine. But the only way you're going to corporately break through in the Spirit, like this morning in worship, and a teaching on tithe, and then Aim coming up here and giving me the announcements, and then posting stuff on Instagram, this is all corporate worship. This is all a form of corporate worship. But I say this because I need you. I need you. You need me. We all need each other. This is how it's like the orbit. There's one sun, there's one Father. And we orbit around him, but it's all in unison. It's all beautiful harmony. It's like when the girls are up here singing the 4-part harmonies and stuff, and you can hear each part. And I challenge you to, next time you listen to them sing, or any of us, you pick out the parts of what they're singing and listen to what they're doing and listen to the spirit that they're bringing. Because it's not just a song. Eve just doesn't pick out songs. She sits on it, and she thinks, and she prays and says, Lord, what am I going to lead the people into this Sunday? Where am I going to take your people this Sunday? Because if I can't take them somewhere, they're not going anywhere. It's like walking around without a leader. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the spirit of service this morning. And if we could turn to Acts chapter 20. So perfect. I'm just going to read a little bit. Because a missions trip isn't leaving the country. A missions trip is the spirit of service. A missions trip is you and bringing your service before God to serve his people. And in a selfless way. So here we are in Acts 20, verse 24. Paul saying, but whether I die or live is not important. For I do not esteem my life as indispensable. It's more important for me to fulfill my destiny and to finish the ministry my Lord Jesus has assigned to me, which is to faithfully preach the wonderful news of God's grace. I've been a part of your lives and shared with you many times the message of God's kingdom realm. But now I leave you, and you will not see my face again. If any of you should be lost, I will not be blamed. You know, when you leave somewhere, that's the attitude that you want, because that means you gave everything. When Dustin, he's got a house church there, and if you're watching, hey Dustin, hey Chris, I'm sure they're probably watching, and probably all of Malawi. But he's got this house church, maybe 20 people, and we did a crusade with 2,000 plus people. And I was kind of feeling, I knew the crusade was coming. We did the pastor's conference first. I saw this coming, and I just looked at him and I said, Dustin, what's God telling you? I was like, this is important. What's God telling you? And he said to empty myself. On the airplane, God speaks to him and says, empty yourself, Dustin. Don't worry, I'll fill you back up. Empty yourself on these people. And that's what Paul did. He says, if I leave and you can't get this, I am not to blame. And he wasn't saying it in a selfish way. He was saying, listen, I've been here. Do you know how long he was with these people? He was there for 3 years preaching night and day. Night and day. He said he was going to synagogues and small groups and all around the place. And for 3 years. So he's saying, listen, guys, if you don't get this by now. But as we read farther, if any of you should be lost, I will not be blamed, for my conscience is clean, because I have taught you everything I could about God's eternal plan, and I've held nothing back. So guard your hearts, be true shepherds over all the flock, and feed them well. Remember, it was the Holy Spirit who appointed you to guard and oversee the churches that belong to Jesus, the Anointed One, which he purchased and established by his own blood. So when we get that in us, when we get those words in us, when we get the Holy Spirit who appointed you guards and overseers of the church that belongs to Jesus Christ, we know that the church, we know that the Malawi, we know that the United States, we know that Canada, it doesn't belong to us. This church doesn't belong to us. This is God's church. This is Kingdom Church. So the only difference between us is incurring a stricter judgment. So let's be humble. Small group the other night, Joe Dahmer said something powerful. I didn't say it back to him yet, but I'm going to say it now. The Lord was speaking. Some of the Lord's deepest moments with us are when we feel the most humility. And I was thinking about the times that we truly humble ourselves and we get before God and the spirit realm just opens up. Because God sees that humble heart. God sees, the Spirit sees, and he wants to download into us. And sometimes that carnality just stands out. It's blocking the way. And it's saying, no, and you have to tell yourself, no, get down. I am a humble man. I'm a humble man. I can speak strong. Sometimes I can speak harsh, but you've got to be humble. We speak strong because the word in us is strong. We speak strong because we know the truth, and we don't want to back down from the truth. I mean, because the truth about compromise is always that old saying is you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Well, let's give them this, and then we'll just walk with this truth. And then maybe we'll bring the truth back to them, but we'll stick with this truth. And, oh, no, we can give that to them too. What are we playing, checkers? You know what I'm saying? Like we end up pulling our Bibles out and playing chess and checkers, and well, if I move the pawn out there, I'm going to risk the pawn because if the queen takes it, then I'm going to get him with the knight. And we have these strategies, and they're all these man-made strategies that we're trying to conquer the church with. We're trying to conquer the world with. We're putting our opinions instead of kingdom on people. I want to put the kingdom on people. So when you go somewhere, when you serve in the mission field, whether it be work, whether it be going to Africa, Asia, wherever you're going to go, it's your mission field. And if you don't have the spirit of service on you, then you have, well, there could be some selfishness in there. But hear me, because I'm talking about the designated times. Like when I just went for 12 days, this was designated time. Spirit of service, I had to pour out. I had to bring everything that I had. You know, I was attacked by witch doctors. I was. So, second testimony. I'm going to sleep in this lodge, beautiful lodge. Chris and Dustin had the air-conditioned rooms. I didn't. Said that because they're watching. And it was a little warm. It was about 32 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is, maybe 85, 90, somewhere up there. Yeah. So, started thinking about witch doctors, and I was like, no, I'm not at the big papa status yet. Yeah, I don't want to go find one, you know. If you go over to Africa with Pastor Chris, you might run into a hut somewhere. And anyway, so I was thinking about witch doctors, and I was kind of like, no. And so I went to sleep thinking about it, and then about 3:30 in the morning, woke up, and I just sat up in bed. I said, no, something's wrong. And I'm looking around. I had this bright light outside my room. I'm looking through the light. I'm looking for shadows. You know, something's wrong. Something's not right. And so I said, all right, well, I'm just going to go back to sleep. So I laid my head back down. I should have stayed up. I laid my head back down, head hits the pillow, and there was this man, this black man, and he had just white paint going across his face. And he's just in my dream going, "Rah!" And I was like, "Wah!" And I wake up, and I'm like, I'm sweating, and I mean, just pouring down. What is that? And I was like, oh, witch doctor. I said, I send you back now where you came from. And it was over like that. And I just felt the peace of God just come over me. I laid back down, fell asleep, and I woke up, thinking about Oral Roberts and when the devil was on his bed, and he woke up and he saw the devil sitting there, and all he said was, oh, it's just you. So to kind of confirm the witch doctor thing, because I was like, I don't know. I mean, I was really scared, but I didn't know. I knew what to say, okay? I did know that because of proper training, okay? There was lots of times I could have went with other words, but because of training in the moment, it's winter time. You get on some ice and it's oh Jesus. What's your response going to be? And I knew I had to send the thing back, so I did. So then I went to Peter, who was our guide, the man that had set up the pastors' conferences and the crusade. And I said, listen, I think I got hit by a witch doctor last night. And I told him about it. He goes, yeah, you did. You did the right thing too. I was like, good. I was like, have you ever had any experiences? He said, yeah. I said, what happened to you? He goes, well, my wife went to bed. So, and by the way, props to Peter if he's watching, because his wife is like 9 months pregnant. I don't know if she was due any time. She's in the kitchen making food for us. I didn't even realize this until a couple days in. And then all of a sudden I'm like, no, we're taking her out to dinner. So I grabbed her. I said, you're coming out to dinner with us. And so she went to sleep, and Peter's sitting in his living room, and he said this enormous snake just comes up through the window, down, and he's sitting there, and it just comes up to him face to face. just looking at him, and then out the window. Second night, does the same thing. Comes in, sits there looking for him. But then he realizes can't find him. So then he's on the street the third day. Witch doctor sees him on the street, comes up to him. He goes, "Where do you live?" He told him his address. He goes, "You're not there." He goes, "I look for you every night." He goes, "And you'll never find me there because I'm under the glory of my Father's wing. You can keep looking, baby, but you're never going to find me." And then you wonder why we have deaf ears open over there. You wonder why we have responses to healing. You wonder why there's a response to faith, because that's all they have. The healings. Oh, man. There was lots of healings. There was actually... when you're in a crusade there, it's hard because you're in villages and the interpretation stuff is a little rocky sometimes. So you just have to keep speaking and just keep going and hope that these guys are saying the right things. And you go and go and go and go. But when you're inside of a crusade, especially a big one like this, it was over 3 days. It was about 2,000 plus people. And there could have been 2,000 there at one point given time, but man, I looked at Chris and I was like, let's just get some people healed. That's what they need. They need healing. They need a touch from God. They don't understand God. This church was just planted there, and if you saw the video from last week, maybe I think I was shooting at the crowd at the stage, and the soldier band was going. But then over here was a building that could fit maybe 200 or 300 people, and there was 7 people in that church. So we were doing a crusade there to bring people in, and so you have to realize that the people have no understanding of God. They have an understanding of spirit, but they don't understand God. They don't understand the fullness of what's going on. So if you try to bring a teaching, you might as well just, it's going to hit the ground. But they understand healing. And then when they see healing, they understand spirit, so then you can introduce them to God. So in Malawi, it's a lot of chiefs. They have like I don't know if they have a prime minister, but they have some stuff like that, but it's, heads of districts and stuff. And then, but inside the districts are chiefs, and it's pretty old school. And so there's still chiefs there. And so what happens is you go into a village, and the chiefs want to see you do what you're going to do. And then they'll release you to do what you're going to do, and then they'll come back periodically throughout the time. And so I just was meditating with the Father. I just said, "Father, I said, people need to get healed, and I want to know." And he said, knees and necks. I said, okay. So I got up there. I said, anybody with a knee issue, I want you to come up. 2 of the chiefs stand up and come up. And I was like, oh boy. So it's test time now. And I said, listen, the word says to lay hands on the sick and they'll recover. So I'm not even going to pray for you. So they all put out their knees, and I just kind of went down the line and just started slapping knees. And when I got to the end, I said, all right, guys, just pick up your knees. And they started picking up their knees and throwing their legs around. And then 2 of the chiefs, who looked about 85 years old, were just jumping, and then they ran back to their seats, healed. Immediately called Peter over and said, usually they wait till the message is over, what's going on, they see more, and they'll release you to do whatever. They immediately called Peter over and said, you're free to do anything you want here. Go for it. This place is yours. And more healings. I prayed for some more people with some ear issues. Their ears opened. It was 100% healing. It was 100% healing. It was an awesome manifestation of the Spirit. When that started happening, especially, that was the 3rd night with the ears. But as soon as they started opening, people just started coming out. All of a sudden I realized I'm not praying for ears anymore. And I'm looking over at Chris going, we got to go. We got to keep praying for people and get them healed. And this one lady walks up, and you can tell she's pretty fuzzy with her eyes. And so I asked Peter, I said, what's going on? And he says, oh, she has blurred vision. And so I took my thumbs and I jammed them in her eyes. And then I released him like this, and she, boom, she opens up. Her eyes were as clear as can be, and she just starts smiling. And I'm like, you can see. And she was like, yeah. I was surprised as she was. I was like, you can see. I was trying to keep it straight, though. You know, I was kind of like, I knew that. I knew you could see. But it's such an amazing experience. It really is, and and words don't do it justice. And I know we'll show some pictures at the end too, in service ends, and they don't do it justice. But in order to go experience something like this, you just got to go. You just got to get on a plane. You got to go over and make sure you're called. Make sure you're called. Make sure that you hear that calling, and make sure that there's a purpose to each trip. As we sat down with Peter, the first thing he said to us, he goes, Lord's going to reveal the purpose of this trip to you at the end of the trip. He couldn't have been more true. This trip was so weird because we usually go over with our Bishop McMore, and we saw him the first night, and he's doing really good. He was having crusades. He was going for it, getting people saved. Many salvations were happening right there on the streets of the Lilongwe. We actually passed his crusades, and he was there just jamming out and singing with Promise, and people were gathered around, and he looked like he was having a really great time. But I could only catch up with him the very first night. They picked us up from the airport. And so then there's no confirmed trips that are coming up. But I do know that they would like us to come over in April and visit the orphanage and get into the southern district of Malawi. So if you look at the map out there on the wall, you can see like Blantyre is pretty south and Lilongwe's kind of there in the middle. They're about 6 hours drive apart from each other, and we'll usually fly into Blantyre when we go with McMore here, and then he takes us down into the southern regions there and to visit the orphanage. So there's a possibility of April, but nothing's actually been planned yet. But with Peter, a little background about him is McMore had a pastor's conference last year in December that Chris Lindbergh and I were at. Peter was in that conference. And then Chris prophesied over him and called him out, and then those two made a connection, and then Peter made this couple, put together the pastors' conferences and the crusades. Peter is, the only way I can describe him is he's like the Andre Bronkhorst of Malawi. Just meek, mild man, knows everyone, but doesn't know anyone. I mean, he walks around like he owns the place. And if you've ever been with Andre in South Africa, you understand what I'm saying, but there's this humility about him. And as we were going along to these pastors' conferences, there was over 400 pastors in 2 conferences that we were able to minister to. That is amazing. These guys put their denominations at the door and walked in. Everything from Catholic, Presbyterian, Baptist, charismatic guys, Assembly of God's guys, Pentecostal, all of them. They came in, they laid it at the door, and they just wanted to be taught. Yeah. So good. They were so hungry that the first prophetic conference, the first pastors' conference, the first day, all of them were healed, except for one person. The only way we knew this is they all came back the second day. And Chris looks around the room and says, I don't think there's anybody that needs to be healed. And you could tell he was searching. He was like searching his soul, his spirit. He was searching. And I'm like, this is interesting. He goes, but no, there's one person. And this one guy stands up and goes, I didn't receive my healing yesterday. He received his healing, and all the pastors in the whole room were healed. It was craziness. And they were also so hungry that we thought we were going to have a little bit of a Chris prophesied over this guy. He said, you, stand up, and gives him this word, and just bop, 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 bop. And he's standing there with his eyes closed like this. He's just receiving the word, and then all of a sudden, he bum rushes Chris. And me and Dustin are sitting there, and Peter's here and go, should we get him? Should we do something about this? And Peter's like, oh, no, he's fine. He's in his face yelling at Chris. Da, 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 da. You can't understand a word he's saying, doesn't speak English, just Chichewa. He's screaming in his face, da, 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 just going crazy. The interpreter's not giving Chris any hope either, because the interpreter's yelling back at him, da, 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 and you're just thinking, what is going on? So, but the hunger was so real that this the background to this pastor was that God was challenging him in his own ministry, telling him he needs to step it up a notch. But he doesn't know how. And he's asking God, how? I don't know how. And that's what Chris was saying. You need to step up your ministry a notch. You need to do this and that and that. But there was no walkthrough. But it was just confirmation of what God was telling him in his prayer time, and he was just confirming it. So he was so mad, and he didn't understand what was going on, that he came running up for more answers. But we didn't know, because there was no English being slung at us, So if you see these guys talk, I mean, they look like they're yelling at each other. You could be sitting at dinner, right? And they're just talking, and you're just like, what are you yelling about? We're not yelling about anything. Maybe they are Italian immigrant or descendants. Maybe that's what it is. So that first pastors conference, I just went in, and that's when I was talking about the 5 phases of Christianity, and then also labeling the fivefold ministry inside of the 5 phases of Christianity in Ephesians 3:17 through 19, right? And they just wanted more, and I thought, well, I'm gonna do this again. And then that's when Dustin and Chris had told me about the when I get up and speak, they see Chris in me. And so when I did it the next time, Dustin, he wanted to be so close. I think I didn't ask him this, but he wanted to write for me. He was writing on the chalkboard and stuff. It was actually a piece of plywood with the chalk. It was the most ridiculous thing. You couldn't see anything Dustin was writing. I felt so bad. It was literally like, that like whitewashed. It was not whitewashed, but it's like the gray boards they have now, like that you would see on like a headboard, or you'd see somewhere like the new designs and stuff, like Join Again stuff, like that gray look. That's what it was. And so you're writing over the wood grains. There's no flat black like chalkboard. It's just you're writing over the wood grains, and your hands, going, and you're trying to get across what you're trying to do. But the pastors caught on so much. They caught on so much they started changing their titles. So Dustin comes running back in. The one way we would keep them, because if you just, for a pastor's conference, a lot of them were coming an hour and a half, 2 hours. So a lot of them the next morning, I got enough out of the first day, and they would stay home. But in order to get them back the next time, we'd say, listen, we're going to feed you, give you transportation, but the second day we're not going to feed you lunch, but we're going to end at 2, we're going to end a little bit early, and then we're going to give you some kwacha to go buy your lunch. And it was enough kwacha so they could actually buy lunch for their family too. So when they went home, they'd have food for their family. So it was almost like a twofold thing. They got to stay and be blessed, and then they got to get a little money to feed their families and go back home with something. But as Dustin was outside, he comes back in. He goes, Mark, they're going crazy out there. They're loving the whole fivefold ministry. They don't understand a word of it, but they love it. And I was like, well, how much do they love it? He goes, they're renaming themselves. Everybody's pastor so-and-so. Now they're pastor teacher or pastor apostle or pastor prophet or whatever, or just a pastor. Or they dropped the pastor. But that's how much they were starting to understand that when you lay out the 5 phases of Christianity, and those are the phases that we're going through in our own lives, right? So those are the phases we're going through, but then when you actually put the 5-fold to each one, then they had purpose. Then they had vision. Then they were like, oh, That's what I do. I'm not a pastor anymore. I'm a teacher. Or I'm this, or I'm, and they're going after it. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they need to understand these things so they can run properly inside of their ministries. They really do, because everybody on every corner is a pastor or an apostle, and then you're asking, oh, you're an apostle? Where are your churches? I don't have church. I have church? What are you doing? And so they're starting to understand these things. So next year in November, they want to do another pastors' conference, and Peter's saying we'll have about 1,000 pastors. If we can get some time in, we'll have 1,000 pastors right in the middle of Lilongwe, in the capital city. We'll rent a conference hall and just go for it. We'll bring 1,000. We'll have to give them transportation. You got to get them in, and then feed them, and then get them back and do a 2-day conference or a 3-4-day, whatever it is. Or else he goes, or we could go around the outskirts of the city and do a north, east, south, west, conference with 300 pastors apiece. And he's got such a vision, and it spoke to me, because the Lord started to speak to me and said, if you can get the capital, you can get the heart of the people. The issue, and one of the major problems that's happening, is that the Islamic men are sending their sons to marry the Christian daughters. Because they know if they can get the women, they get the kids. And then they can start to go. Now, Malawi is far from Islamic, but it's real. There's some pretty big synagogues, they're big temples or whatever they call them. But it's pretty real. But the Christianity really outweighs it. But I don't want to think that way. I want to think world domination. That's what I want to think. So I knew that was the Lord speaking, that if you can get the heart, if you can get the capital, if you can get all the pastors, if you can get 1,000 pastors in one room in the U.S., could you imagine that? Could you imagine that every seat in here is just filled with a pastor, a leader of a congregation, a church, or an apostle, or a prophet? Could you imagine the strength the U.S. would have? I was just looking at that going, 1,000 pastors in Lilongwe, in one place, and God's heart starts to beat. And they're laying their denominations at the door because they're just thinking, well, this is just a title thing. I'm not worried about that. I'm concerned about kingdom. Because God is so powerful, and the things that we're being taught and the things that we're seeing are so good and so real. It's a constant reality that they live in. It's a constant battle. Think about some of the old ways of surgery that we used to do in the U.S. You get an infection. I mean, when you think about even the Civil War, a lot of people didn't die from being shot. They died from the infection. And to stop infection, they didn't have penicillin. They had no cillins. It's true. They had no cillins. Amoxicillin. They had no cillins. So what would they do? They would cut your leg off. That's what they still do over there. This is where their faith is. And the kids. The kids at the crusade. The pictures of the kids, man. When you get rocking out there with the praise and worship stuff, we had this big band in. They were called the Soldiers. They were actually Malawian soldiers, and on the side they would sing. But they called us each up at Chris, Dustin, and myself, and we had to dance like them too. And I have videos of that. If you want to see that. I would say I couldn't give myself necessarily an A, but I was at the C+, B- range, I think. And yeah, Chris, if you're watching, I'll post it later. It was to see the dust. The red dirt, if you've been there, you know the red dirt, the dust just rising, and the kids raging, and the men raging. And then it was funny because the kids and all the young people were up front, and then there was like this line of atmosphere, like emptiness. And then there was the other people sitting down. And as I remember like the last time I spoke here, I was just thinking about that, like somewhere along the lines, we go from being a child to realizing we're an adult. And then, oh, no, that's not for me. That's childlike behavior. I can't do that. And we talk ourselves into getting out of the praises. We make excuses, and I don't want to, nope, that's for the kids. You have a nice time with the kids. That's for the kids. But unless we have childlike faith, those kids were so amazing. They didn't stop dancing. If the music was on, I mean, they were just gung-ho, up and all over the place. I mean, they could really care less about three white guys sitting there too. They were just going for it. I mean, their legs were going crazy, and oh, my shirt. Forgot. I had a tailor-made shirt. 3 of them. Yeah. Had to pick out the material. Aim hates it. I said, I have 3 nice, so this is my conversation with my wife in the room. She goes, what are you going to wear? I said, I have 3 nice African shirts in the closet. And she acts like nice and African shirts is an oxymoron. And I'm thinking, no, they're nice. They're the patterns, and the guy sewed them. I mean, I got measured. I mean, for like, 4,000 kwacha for material, 3,000 for the tailor, $7 a shirt to have it tailored to fit you correctly. You know, it's I think you bought suits from them, right? They measure everything, and the $40 a suit, and it's done in a day. Like a couple days for the suit. We got the shirt. The shirt was 24 hours. We came back, and then he tried goofing with us. He goes, we'll be done next Friday. And I was like, what? He goes, just kidding. Here's your shirts. I was like, give me my money back. Men are everywhere. So I had all these nice African shirts in my closet, and this one I bought. The blue one was. Yeah. So okay. I am running out of time here. So the second pastors conference, I really want to talk about that, because when we got through the first one, the 3 of us were just stoked for the second one. Like, we couldn't wait. And Dustin gets up there at the end, and he calls for healing, but he's never done anything like this before. So he looks at Chris and I, and he was like, so we all get up there. We're all standing there, and we're ready to go. So Chris says, we're going to go through the crowd, because when you call for healing there, you get all of them. And just, there's all sitting there like, touch me. And so we ran through the crowd. We touched everybody and went back to our seats, and we're just standing there. And Peter gets the microphone, and this roar of the Spirit started like I've never heard in my entire life. I sent it to AIM. That was just the end of it, though. That wasn't even the beginning. I was like, what's going on? And then Chris, if you ever see Chris post, Mark Rapecki was telling me the other day, he saw this post of Chris Lindbergh during the middle of this rage on Facebook. And he goes, there's all those Africans raging, and then all of a sudden the camera hits Mark's head, and you're just like, I was stricken by the Spirit. I was done. I was like, I don't even know what's going on right now. Like, it was like liftoff time. So you had 200 plus pastors raging in the Spirit because of all the healings that just took place, and because their God was so good. It was just like, the upper room was like whoosh, this roar came through the place, and just the place broke into pandemonium. It was just crazy godness everywhere. It was. I don't know how else to explain it. It was every guy And there was a couple ladies, pastors, on their tippy toes, yelling at the top of their lungs with their hands as far as they could reach. The next day, they started to understand, the last day of the pastors' conference, they started to understand like where we were going, especially in the healing realm and stuff. And all of a sudden, we called for healing, and like this whole crowd of pastors just stood up and put their hands forward. We didn't ask them to agree with us. We didn't ask for any of it. They wanted to be a part of it. That's what they wanted. They wanted that anointing. They wanted that on them. So their response to us calling for healing was the people coming up, them seeing the people, being enlightened by the word, and then standing up and reaching their hands out going, I'm part of this. I'm a part of this. I'm not, no. This isn't just America, Canada, United. It's not about that. We serve a kingdom with no borders. God has no borders. It's kingdom there, it's kingdom here. It's healing there, it's healing here. It's prophecy there, it's prophecy here. And they wanted a part of it. They felt the mantle of it. And the weight of it. They felt it so much. It's such a humbling experience that I have probably 85 pictures on my phone of receiving gifts. They lined the three of us up. Chris, myself, and Dustin. And the pastors began to bring gifts. Bags of stuff. Food. Clothes. Bibles. Some of the pastors don't have a Bible and they're bringing us Bibles. We passed out notebooks and pens. They would bring them back. And all you can think about is, no, we gave those to you. Their notes are, I don't know these people. How they can get their notes back? I have to trust Spirit. And I have to be humble. The worst thing I can do is, no, I can't take this. I can't take this from you. That's not humility. That would be the opposite. But humility would be to stand there and take those. We filled up a trunk. Our trunk was full of black bags everywhere. Black bags, just packed. And they shut it. And we're sitting there weeping of all this stuff that these guys traveled for an hour, half an hour, 2 hours. There was hardly any shopping around. There you do your shopping on the street. You literally walk out the door and there's people everywhere selling guavas or mangoes or rice or honey or whatever. And you go out and you buy it all and you go home. There was none of that around where we were. There was a little bit of it, but nothing that I saw that we received. So, they had to go and get those things and bring them back and prepare an offering for 3 dudes that came to pour their lives out. Are you prepared to pour your life out? Are you prepared to pour your life out for the ministry? Well, I'm not a pastor, so what? Oh, I'm not, so what? You are a child of God and you're called to do it. You're called to partake in it. The fivefold isn't for everyone. There's people that God has ordained and set into place to do these things. But the gifts that we find in Corinthians, they're for everyone. They're for everyone. And, we sit under a pastor that says, okay, you're good at that, now go do this. And you're like, but no, I want to stay here where I'm good at this. Well, no, you can do this like this, over here. Have you ever tried prophesying? First day I spoke on the fivefold and gave them Ephesians 3. I sit down. Lord says to me, you're not done. I said, what are you expecting, Father? He goes, now you're going to pick them out of the crowd and call them into it. I said, okay. And I'm sitting there, and I look over, and this guy stands up, he goes, and I see teacher across his chest. And I'm like, thank you, Father, found the first one. And I'm looking across, and then I see the evangelist, And then I see the apostle. And then I saw the prophet. And I missed one. They were all pastors. I don't know if I did pastor. Anyway. Actually, no, I did do pastor. There was a guy there with a smile. I mean, as big as the earth. I told him. He was sitting behind me. I said, you're not to sit there anymore when I speak. He goes, why? I said, I need your smile right there. And he's, oh, he gets up, he runs, he's sitting there, and he's listening to me the whole time. So that turns out it was more distracting than good. His name was McDonald's. I said, that's the way I feel when I go there. He's like, what? You smile at the beginning and then you leave with a frown. So, well, sometimes you feel, all right, that's enough of that. But I had to call him out. And I did, and I remember that when I was speaking to this guy about being a teacher, the whole place erupted. They're laughing, and you don't know what they're laughing about. They're all speaking in Chichewa everywhere, and you're thinking, oh, I'm like, Lord, I got to stay calm. I can't. I was about to rebuke people. I was like, no, I can't do this. And then, so I looked at him, I said, what are they saying? He goes, I'm a professor at the University of Malawi. And I was like, got it. Yeah, no, I was like, that was amazing. Because I don't look at myself as, I don't sit in the office of a prophet. I'm not supposed to. Because that's not my office. But it says that all can prophesy. So if there's no prophet around, guess what your job is? To be sensitive to the Spirit, to hear that prophetic word. I never forget the time that I was in Wysox and I felt the mantle of Andre. I felt him right here. And I looked up at this kid. They brought him through the door. Remember, they brought him right through the door. They interrupted the middle of the service and just said, this kid needs prayer. And I just prophesied over him. I don't remember a word I said, prophesied over him. And then all of a sudden, his mom's sitting there going, see, I told you, this is what your principal said. And then the guy's saying, yeah, I told you the same thing yesterday. But it's being in the Spirit and being able to flow in those things and see those things. So, I think I'm going to end there. Am I missing anything, babe? Yeah. Oh, Peter. Also, some more scriptures. Oh, Lord have mercy. He did.
But he still does.
He still does. Thank you. The spirit of service. We all have it. We're all called to it. We're all a part of it. Sometimes it's serving in the church here. Sometimes it's serving outside. It's a spirit that you carry. It's something that once you put on, I mean, I'd almost recommend looking at it like a mantle. It's almost something that you would put on. It's something that you think about. It's, what's your response? What's your daily response to waking up? What is it? The daily response. That when your eyes open, what are you thinking about? Thinking about your wife? Thinking about your kids? Thinking about what you're going to eat? Thinking about work? Thinking about God? And when we keep these things in order, we're able to keep our lives in order. What's your response going to be? What's your response going to be? Maybe we could all stand. I'm just going to pray, and then at the end there, I would love to pray for some people. If it's something that that you want prayer for the spirit of service. I hope that you can hear me. That it goes beyond a missions trip. It's a lifestyle. Spirit of service is a lifestyle. It's something that we put on and we walk in, and we don't set it down.